Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Working in Hockey podcast. Today, I am stoked to be joined by my guy, David Herman, currently the social programmer of BR Open Ice, doing some work on NHL on TNT as well. David, you've got a long storied path through sports media, digital media, marketing, photography, everything that there is to do in the world of hockey. I appreciate you taking the time to join me here today.
No, Nick, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Big fan, huge supporter of what you're doing on LinkedIn to try and provide opportunities for so many professionals in sports.
Very much appreciated. And like I say, you've done a lot, my friend. You've touched on a lot of different areas within sports, within hockey, within different teams as well. But like I said off the hop, BR Open Ice, one of my favorite social pages online, of course, these days, where you can go for all your hockey coverage, news, updates, highlights, fun stuff, etc. Talk to me about your role as a social programmer there. How did you find out about that role? How did you get into that role? What's it like day to day? Give me the full run of the mill.
Oh my goodness, there's so much to catch up on when it comes to that question. I found out about the job completely randomly through Twitter. My boss's boss and the director of brand identity, Evan Sporer, made a job posting on Twitter, and I will never ever forget it because he used the photo of the trophy that was constructed out of pasta that they made for David Pastrnak and was like, if you want to work in one of the coolest jobs in not just hockey, in sports, and you live for this, you have to give this an application. And I was on that in 45 minutes. It was so cool to see that come up. I had been a big fan of the pages for a long time, and to have the opportunity to work with some of the best and brightest minds in hockey, such a privilege and opportunity. I'm one of 4 members on the BR Open Ice team. I have a social programmer counterpart, Sam, who's based out of Raleigh. I have my direct manager and Sam's direct manager, Matthew Schneider, and then Evan Sporer, who oversees all 3 of us. My job kind of depends on whether I'm on a day or a night shift. I don't necessarily have like a standard 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. Most of my time right now is spent on the other side of the clock on a 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. shift when it comes to we call it the live game window. So that means I can have anywhere from, let's say, 4 to 6 NHL games going on at once through our clipping software. I'm keeping tabs, just like roving eyes, basically on 2 monitors to make sure that I'm not missing a highlight, a goal, a big hit, a moment off of the broadcast, something like that, and making sure that that content is appropriate for social, packaged effectively, and then performs across our Instagram, X, Twitter accounts, and then TikTok as well.
Very cool. No, it's a very interesting role to me, and I've done a lot of the same work through over the years with Hockey Collective, watching highlights, posting, clipping, having multiple screens going, making sure you don't miss something, making sure you spell a random guy's name right when you're posting his goal for the first time. There's a lot of fun that goes into trying to be unique and trying to be quick and trying to be authentic and have fun with these clips and highlights. Talk to me about what your favorite parts of that role are. What experiences, what moments stand out so far?
Oh my goodness. I think for me, one of my favorite pieces of content this season, and one that's helped me foster a little bit of a relationship with the Winnipeg Jets, was the Sleepy Baby moment. I think it's still pinned on our TikTok. It might still be pinned on our Instagram reels. But I happen to just be watching the Winnipeg broadcast as it was going to break. And one of the advantages of our software as a league right holder is that we have the in-arena feed of the broadcast itself. So when the broadcast for the general public goes to commercials, we have the ability to see sometimes what's going on the video board. And their cameraman just so happened to be just trained on this adorable little baby conked out in what looked like a suit, in what looked like a costume from Up, of like the full pilot bomber setup. And they came back from commercial. It's got the TSN music behind it. And it was just this quintessential 6-second clip and such a viral, easily shareable moment. And the Winnipeg guys were busy as the game was going on, and I happened to talk with Cameron after the fact, and it's led to so many more pieces of content just because of that spontaneous moment. It's that easy relatability, it's that easy aw sort of thing that is the lighter side of hockey. It doesn't always have to necessarily be highlights. It can be those fun moments as well.
100%. No, I think that's super well said, and I think it's a competitive landscape these days with trying to cover sports and people trying to make a name or create a page in sports highlights and news, and so often everybody will go for the big highlights, and those can be rewarding, and those are going to do great numbers for BR Open Ice or Hockey Collective or whoever. But a lot of times it's those little things, like you said, it just happened to work out that the camera panned there. But it's those little unique moments, the things that stand out, the things that you aren't going to see 100 times on your feed, right? McDavid
Yeah,
scores a beautiful goal. We're all going to see it 100 times. That's just how it's going to happen today. But those fun, unique little moments are what makes it special, right?
definitely. It was one of those things I had to learn as I settled into the account of we talk often in our programming meetings about like gray lines of sometimes there's no specific handbook of how to handle moments in
Yeah.
the NHL of a goal that might have been pretty uh, might not necessarily hit the Twitter feed because it belongs to a fourth liner that's only going to play 6 or so games in the NHL, and it doesn't necessarily have as much national relevance. Does that clip then get elevated to Instagram if it's a superstar player? All of those are split second decisions that you have to make to say, is this content worthwhile for its respective feed?
100%. And I think, like you said, there's strategic decision making there. It's very quick. You got to make quick decisions. Sometimes you make the right one, sometimes you make the wrong one. But more often than not, it's about getting a little bit lucky, but being good at it too, right? We talked before off air here about some of our viral posts and moments from the seasons and things like that. And, there's always a little bit of luck involved with what hits the algorithm properly in today's world, huh?
Oh, it's a black box. You can try your best. I remember I was talking during the interview about it of like I think the line it was in some interview of like how do you define like a viral clip or what's your formula in terms of getting a viral clip? And I think there's a couple of key metrics that you can use to strengthen your chances,
Mhm.
but there's no bona fide way to say this clip is going to go viral. The 50-year-old CEO that's like make it perform has no understanding that there's so much more that goes into it, and it's not just a one-off post that's going to hit and break the internet.
No, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. And I expect or suspect that some of those learnings and kind of growth with social and understanding of virality and clips and everything comes from your experience with the Hockey House. I know that you're currently the executive producer there. I will gush about that page and brand in a minute, but tell me a little bit about that, what you guys are up to, and what the brand's all about.
Oh, so the Hockey House right now is the leading media outlet I think in North America when it comes to non-varsity hockey. So for those who kind of stay within the NHL ranks and aren't familiar with the US collegiate setup, you've got NCAA D1 at the top of the pyramid, you've got NCAA D3 below that, and below that you've got the entire world and landscape of club hockey. So that's the ACHA and AAU, and that ranges all the way in the top from ACHA Division 1 teams all the way at the bottom to AAU Division 3 teams, and then you've got the women's side as well, ACHA Women's 1, 2, and now the AAU Women's Division. The really special thing about club hockey is that it encompasses so much more of a total addressable market than purely the NCAA D1 market has. There's 30, 40 or so NCAA D1 teams in the country, but there's 500 or so at the club hockey level, wildly ranging in intensity, skill, quality of coverage, everything from that. And as someone who went to an ACHA school and kind of was a victim of the labeling of club hockey as a quote unquote dirty word. When I graduated, I wanted to give back to club hockey, and I happened to find my way into this role with what Mackenzie Murphy had created at that point. I was a fan. I was a listener. I was one of the first followers of the page because I couldn't believe there was a media outlet devoted to club hockey. And when I got the opportunity to edit an episode, I just reached out cold and I was like, hey, saw you guys haven't been doing any post production necessarily on the podcast. I'd love to give it a shot on this program that I downloaded. It was like a match made in heaven, and uh, one thing turned into another, and editing the episodes very quickly turned into helping to run the socials, and then very quickly turned into executive producing and co-running the show with Mackenzie Murphy. It's been a dream come true to come on board from, I think it was roughly 4,000 followers at the time, and I think we're pushing 60,000 right now. It's been unbelievable to see the growth of club hockey from that time.
It sure has. It sure has. And that's from afar, I'm saying that. But I think the one thing that you touched on there that I really love about the brand, and I love about hockey and sports in general, is it's so much more relatable when it's club hockey. Like everybody knows somebody who played club hockey or plays, or maybe you played, or whatever it is. And that's not to take away from the skill or the compete or anything like that, like you said, but it's the fact that it's attainable, it's relatable, so it's digestible to so many more people. There's always going to be NHL fans. NHL is the best of the best. It's the best in the world. It's the best product on ice. That makes sense for sure. We're always going to have NHL coverage, but a lot more relatable and digestible is club hockey, is college hockey, is all these different routes. So to have a page, a brand, an outlet that's covering the game like this is super cool to me. And I think as a fan, like I spend as much time scrolling a page like that as I do an NHL team's page because I like seeing that real relatable kind of content, right?
You're spot on, and that speaks that's very profound for you to say. I think one of the other things that helps with that relatability is the big name brands that are on those page, and that's kind of our competitive advantage in club hockey as a whole versus NCAA D3 is that it's so much easier for the casual hockey fan and then casual fan who might see something on the Instagram Explore page to relate to a piece of content that's the University of Alabama,
Yeah.
the University of Texas, Kentucky, Georgia, these major football schools, these major athletics powerhouses that now have hockey teams versus you're going for a Gustavus Adolphus, a Hobart, a Framingham, a team whose logo that you put on Explore and you're like, is this a custom generated logo? Or are they playing Nischel right now? Like, it's so much more recognizable, and that's really where we've seen a lot of our strong growth from as a brand.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. And again, if anybody hasn't seen it somehow in their travels through social media, be sure to check out the Hockey House. Lots of great stuff, lots of great content. And again, not to take away from the TSN, the BR Open Ice, the Hockey Collective, but you're going to see things on the Hockey House that you aren't on those other channels, and that's what makes it cool. And again, just very relatable and personable to a lot of people there. I know also, David, you spent some time with the Utica Comets in the AHL as social media, digital content role there. Talk to me about that role, that experience, what you were able to take away from your time with Utica and kind of transition into your current roles here today.
Sure. So I'll take a step back before Utica. When I graduated, I kind of made an executive decision after doing social for a couple of years, having started my own business and all of these things, that I didn't want to necessarily go down the entry level ticket sales path that was kind of being forced upon me within my sports management degree. And I was like, let me pivot outside of sports for a couple of years and then come back in once the time is right. Happened to be a nice little gamble on myself because that was directly into COVID. And had I gone through the sports path at that point, it might have been a very different path to where I am currently. And after a couple of years outside of sports, in doing tech sales, I realized that it wasn't my true passion. I was fine at it. It was okay. but it wasn't what really got me up in the morning. Like, I was in college on a Friday and Saturday night to get to Bird, and I knew that I needed to get back into sports sooner rather than later. I had the opportunity to start dipping my toes into that uh, the, as the point individual for when the MASL pivoted over to Twitch. And it just so happened to be that the ownership for Utica City FC and the MASL also runs the Utica Comets. And so my name was familiar to them because I had done a solid job with that transition, so that when that job opened up with Utica, they were like, oh, we know that kid. Um, and it was everything I could have asked for in a role. It was very, very similar. I like to joke around in kind of octopus functionality that I was in Ohio, where sometimes you have to have 8 arms and you're doing a whole lot during game days and not game days, just because it's the expectation of the staff. Um, it was really a formative learning experience for me to step in and be in a professional environment, to not only have hockey under my belt for that, but to also have soccer, to have all of the restaurants that were under the corporate umbrella as well. It was a ton of work, but one that really refined my personal and professional skill set and shaped me into who I am right now.
No, I think that's a super beneficial role to be able to dip your toes into so many areas. And like you said, I think that's how so many people learn and just kind of expand it. And is it hard in the moment? Absolutely. But like you said, looking back on it now, you're so grateful for the opportunity to be able to work with a soccer team and a hockey team at the same time. Sure, they're both
Yeah.
sports teams, but the content, the approach, the strategy, everything's so much different. Talk to me a little bit about the day to day there, kind of like you said, balancing between these different avenues within the business. What was a day to day like in that role? I expect very hectic, very different day to day.
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth on that one. I would say there really was no day. There were few days that were the same. Like, you could get in for 9 a.m. and you walk over and you're shooting hockey practice first thing. You walk over, and then connected to that building is also the turf. So you're going over and also shooting the soccer practice. You're taking those photos back. You're editing for both accounts. You might at 2 p.m. go over to a restaurant and then start taking photos of food and ice cream and steaks, because that's how it was in the role. Um, and it was just a perk of kind of working under a giant corporate umbrella. Later on in the day, you might get an hour or so to go home and change, and then you've got a full game day atmosphere to go
Maybe,
on.
maybe if you're lucky.
Maybe if I'm lucky. And then come back, you shoot walk-ins, you edit walk-ins, you post walk-ins. You're out on the bench photographing that, culling those photos, editing those photos, getting them out on social. You're back and clipping footage off of the live stream for Twitter. You're doing all of these different things, maybe two of them at the same time, literally juggling a laptop and a camera in one hand. Um, it was not for the faint of heart, but it was something that was a rush and invigorating, and the satisfaction of, like, I am creating this content and fans out there are learning more about these prospects and staying in touch with their teams because of the content that I'm creating, was something that kept me going, and it was really, really special.
No, that's very well said. And one other thing I wanted to circle back on there that you mentioned is through some prior work and experiences, they knew your name and they were familiar with you through that. So I think that that's something I very often say. Anybody listening to this for whatever episode we're on now, 30 something, is like, oh, you say this every episode, Nick. But I think the reality is just getting your name out there and having people know your name is so important in such a competitive landscape. Doesn't matter if you were a part-time usher in the stadium and that's why they know your name, or if you're a freelance photographer for the team, or if you just bumped into somebody on the street and they read your name on the Starbucks cup. Having the familiarity with your name with a team is so important when you're looking to get those first roles in sports. What would you attest to that? And can you back me up there?
100% spot on. When I reviewed intern applications when I was in Utica, it was so easy to be like, this person is really just trying to dip their toes into sports right after graduation, and this person has like the body of experience that we're looking for. And all I can say is just get involved at whatever level. You do not have to go out and get that dream internship as a freshman with an NHL team. You do not have to do any of those things. You have to just get involved in some capacity. That's why I preach club hockey as a really awesome alternative for so many kids trying to get into the industry. I have seen photographers, writers, videographers, communications professionals, equipment managers, every single facet of the on and off ice environment go on and have successful careers within the sports industry because of the work that they did at that level, because they bolstered their resume, because they were willing to take a chance, because they were willing to put their nose to the grindstone and work incredibly, incredibly hard to do so.
Perfect. I'm just going to find the timestamp button here to mark this as a clip. Nolan, make sure you get that one. That's a perfect answer from our guy, David, here. I want to go all the way back here, David. We were talking a little bit off air before here, but you're the man, the myth, the legend behind the Jersey Finder. One of my favorite accounts, I'll say back in the day, even though it wasn't that long ago. Talk to the people a little bit about the Jersey Finder, how that idea came about, what you were doing to aggregate and combine and pull so much information, and what it turned into overall.
Oh my goodness. Jersey Finder was a labor of love. It started just as a way um, for myself and a friend to take advantage of the big inventory shift from Reebok over to Adidas. And I was a size small in jerseys, he was a size extra large, and we were finding all of these sizes in between at dirt cheap prices. And we're like, someone needs to put these out there and make sure people take advantage of them. It started really completely altruistically. I was involved with the Our Hockey Jerseys Discord, and I was sharing a lot of jerseys in there in the scouting channel. And eventually it morphed into like they kind of renamed the channel to a ton of my deals. And I was like, you know what? I'd like to go bigger than just Discord, and I'll post them publicly on Twitter. And before I knew it, sooner rather than later, with a couple of cosigns from some of the friends that I had made through the NHL streaming community, cannot thank Brent X Tech enough for that. And then Tyler Center STB Visuals for helping me get the brand off the ground in like a 3 a.m. text conversation with him. It was so quick through word of mouth, and then a trust factor within the overall Twitter community to be like, this is a guy where you can go and pretty much 100% of the time you are going to get a deal on something you would have paid a ton more at retail. And that was my goal as a college student, was I wanted to get over that $220 price tag that an Adidas retail jersey was at, while still maintaining the quality of a legitimate jersey and not going for a fake one. And it was a ton of work to learn the search systems on eBay and build bots. There was a member of my Discord that helped me with an eBay affiliate conversion thing. It was unbelievable, and it exploded into something wilder than I ever could have imagined. It was a ton of fun while it lasted to be that personality on Twitter.
It was a super cool account. I mean, again, I watched all the time. I scroll through the jerseys just to see what was out there. And anybody who knows me knows I'm a bit of a jersey nerd and have a weird collection, not a cool collection, but a weird collection of jerseys. But I'm sure just the takeaways of experience and the learnings, whether it was your eBay searches or bots or everything in between, just the learnings there was very beneficial down your career. And I mean, I can draw some comparisons and similarities to working in hockey there, right? Being an an aggregate kind of center for the people, bringing in your passion and something you're good at to tie into helping people there is a cool initiative. And I hope the Jersey Finder finds its way back someday, because I would love that.
Who knows? Who knows? Maybe sooner rather than later. It seems like there's going to be maybe some surplus of Adidas jerseys around the corner with the transition to Fanatics. I've just been waiting for the shoe to drop so that there's this big clear out and maybe everyone gets to enjoy $40 Adidas jerseys. But we'll see. I don't know. I mean, the lesson I remember taking with Jersey Finder directly as a transition over to Utica was, I remember very early in my time with the Comets, my boss was like, "Hey, do you know Shopify?" And I had gone through and I had made the website for Jersey Finder, and I had spent an entire winter break basically going through and customizing and learning all of the design and inventory management. I was like, "Yeah, I know why." And he was like, "Cool, you run the Shopify now." And I was like, "Okay." As you learn working in sports, the other duties as assigned, especially in minor league sports, comes up often. And Shopify very quickly became an integral part of my job. Of beyond just the on ice responsibilities, there was the merchandise photos and everything as well, just because I had that previous knowledge of the platform through Jersey Finder. And if there's anything you can take away from that, is that always you're going to find that your previous experiences will dovetail so nicely into the path that you want to, if you just kind of stay. Think about it as like a skill tree, basically, of like those fundamental things that you learn at the bottom are going to come into play as you continue to level up, basically.
They absolutely will. They always find a way to pop back up the skills tree, the transferable skills. But I think as well, they're just being able to create value in a different way. They might have hired another digital content role or a different photographer that didn't know Shopify, and then their role changes a little bit and they find a different avenue, right? So being able to find those lanes and avenues in any role where you can create value for the business, that's the name of the game at the end of the day. That's how you're going to succeed. That's how you're going to get that promotion, is creating value within what you are doing. Speaking of that a little bit, I want to touch on photography. We've kind of touched on it throughout here, but I want to talk to you a little bit about the passion and the talent for it. Passion is one thing. I'm passionate about a lot of things. I suck at some of them. I'm talented at a lot of things. I hate some of the things I'm talented at. There's a fine line between passion and talent, and I
Hmm.
think that that's super important to identify as early as you can. Have you identified that point with photography? Is that why you wanted to continue pursuing it? Where did that passion, where did that initial talent come from?
So I kind of picked up photography late. I was always enamored really with the aesthetics of hockey. I was a big like hockey trading card guy growing up. Like I had the posters on the wall, and I felt like I always looked at hockey photography differently than other people, whereas like someone might be examining a trading card and like going through the stats or just like kind of perusing just to peruse. I was more digesting kind of the fundamentals of it before I even really knew what those were. And when I got the opportunity to pick it up in senior year of college, I took that opportunity and ran with it, just because I wanted to find something that broadened my skill set from just a social media manager to being like, you know what, I have this understanding and appreciation for it. Can I go and accomplish what I find aesthetically pleasing? And it was just a new challenge for me to take on. And I did it through senior year, and then I did it through COVID, and I put it down for a little bit. Um, and it wasn't something that they originally hired me for. Like they knew I had photographed and everything like that, but I really blossomed in it when I had the reps in Utica. And then the role kind of turned into, from before I got hired of like just a standard social media manager, to my boss describing it to me as like the next person who has to come in is like social media manager and blank. And it has to be something else. I think it speaks to, in this modern and very competitive landscape, especially on Hockey Social, of you have to be, and you have to have a way to set yourself apart from the crowd. And photography kind of wound up being that avenue for me.
That's super cool, and just hearing you talk about it, you definitely have the passion for it, and seeing your work, you definitely have the talent for it as well. So that's a super cool bridge to have between social media, photography, and everything in between in marketing that you've done to date. This has been a blast so far, David. Want to wrap it up with just a couple of questions here. The first one being, you're probably the first guest we've had on that has their resume on their LinkedIn profile. Was that a conscious decision? Was that a conscious effort? Did somebody tell you to do that? Because I love that move and I tell people to do it all the time. It is a very underutilized feature of LinkedIn, especially for people in the job hunt.
Oh my God. I have to give a lot of credit to some of the business classes that I took at Ohio, specifically a couple that were designed on like improving our LinkedIn, and some of those fundamental things that I think are just like a universal truth that everyone understands, like the putting the resume on a LinkedIn, highlighting my gondola in a featured section, going through and filling out my profile to the best of my ability, are not sometimes common intuition. And I can say from firsthand experience, they can definitely subconsciously or consciously be a merit or a demerit against you as you're applying through roles. Making sure that all of your supplementary information is well filled out and then easily accessible for a hiring manager can just be that simple plus to get you ahead in the job search that you don't even know is going on. Cannot recommend making sure that you are as sufficiently prepared as possible with something like a resume on your LinkedIn profile.
Very well said. And I think it's like you said, the easily accessible. That's the biggest thing. The recruiter isn't trying to be an ass. They're not trying to say, oh, David doesn't have anything highlighted or bolded or linked in his resume. But if you don't have it, then you're not making their life easy. So their eyes are going to start to wander. They're going to think about that last resume they saw that was linked properly or had those key metrics highlighted and bolded. You got to set yourself up for success, and putting your resume on your LinkedIn profile is one of those ways you can absolutely do that. Glad to hear they're teaching that in some schools. Definitely not all schools, some schools. So that's a
Definitely not all
positive.
schools.
Absolutely. But to wrap things up here, David, you've seen the show. You know where I'm going. We always wrap things up with just some career advice. What advice could you give for somebody looking to break into the hockey industry, potentially in a social media photography role such as yourself?
Uh, Couple of things. Don't be afraid to reach out and network. I think it's so imperative to try and get your name out there, especially when you've got that fleshed out personal brand. You don't necessarily have to know what direction you want to take in sports, but if you present yourself like a motivated and determined high school or college student, that's going to provide you so much more of an advantage when you're trying to talk to people that you aspire to be like within the space. The other thing is like people in our shoes don't bite. Like we're really happy. I know I am. Every single time I get a message from a college student, from someone who's slightly junior to me, and I know I'm junior within the space. I'm so happy to sit down and talk for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, about trying to make sure that they can get ahead within the sports industry. Personal philosophy is try and leave things better than you found them, and making a path that's better for those aspiring young professionals is really, really important to me. Um, as we've touched on, having your resume and cover letter adequately filled out, formatted nicely, uh, proper grammar, no misspellings, margins are good. You're utilizing space. All of these things that Nick, I'm sure, loves to harp on with people and knows full well when it comes to editing resumes. Those things are gonna be the world. And then the last piece of advice: this is not a paid ad, I promise. If you're in social specifically within sports, I cannot recommend enough getting a gondola account, because it is a living, breathing resume of your content. It allows you to aggregate all of these metrics, and it makes your resume a ton better. And I cannot recommend that enough.
I couldn't agree more. Gondola, LinkedIn, these are the modern day resumes. You can throw Instagram in that mix. I'm going to have some videos
Yeah,
coming out on this shortly, but I mean, your Instagram's fabulous kind of culmination of all your work and, tips and tricks and things that you've experienced on the story highlights as well. Instagram, whether you like it or not, guys, professional companies are looking at it. So, all these things, your public reputation and profile are your modern day resume. You still got to make the old paper copy here and fill out your bullet points, but all these things are your modern day resume. I think that's fabulous advice, David. Tell the people where they can find you if they have any questions or want to take you up on that 30 to 45-minute chat.
sure. You can reach out anytime on LinkedIn. I think it's linkedin.com, and then it's David-Herman. You can reach out on Twitter at Herman of the Year. You can follow along with Bleacher Report on Open Ice, Bleacher Report Open Ice on all of your social media platforms. Hockey House Pod with the same thing. Maybe Jersey Finder too. Who knows? But we'll get there when we get there.
I'm hopeful for the last one. I'm hopeful Jersey Finder finds its way back here. But David, this has been an absolute pleasure. I can't thank you enough for the time here. I can't wait to see what you continue to do, both behind the camera and on social media. And guys, be sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you next week on the Working in Hockey podcast.
Thanks so much, Nick.